Recently, I developed a friendship with a local person who happens to be a Zen Buddhist. And because there are so few Buddhists in my area, and in particular no Shin Buddhists at all, I agreed to join in some morning meditation sessions that this particular individual has with 4 or 5 of her Dharma friends who are located around the United States, none of the others of whom are in our area. And I just recently sort of recited some of the verses from those early morning, 1/2 hour only sessions. And so I just want to go over a few of those verses in the context of, what are my thoughts and musings about them. And by the way, within the context of this session, there is actually simply a 20-minute period of meditation, zazen. So anyhow, the beginning verse is return to presence. Releasing all harmful karma ever created by me since of old on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my conduct, speech, and thought, now I return to presence. Boy, that is a powerful kind of sentence to unpack because it acknowledges, again, our limitations, our inevitable obstacles to enlightenment as a result of us being filled with the so-called 3 poisons of greed, namely wanting to pull things toward us, aversion, wanting to push things away, and ignorance, the fact that we don't have in our ordinary state of mind the ability to appreciate the non-dual perspective associated with the profound teachings of the Mahayana. And of course, these elements of poison, if you will, can be, quote, born of conduct, speech, and thought. Those are kind of the 3 aspects of our activity as a human being that can be impaired and perverted, really, as a result of these poisons. I now return to presence. So I think a lot of Zen Buddhism and of Buddhism in general, for those that pursue a more vigorous attempt to attain enlightenment, is to realize that the here and now is, in a very fundamental sense, the only reality that exists. So we're trying to return to that presence and not be as preoccupied with regrets about things in the past, with anticipation of things in the future, etc. It brings to mind Baba Ram Das, his famous book. Of course, he was Richard Alpert, the clinical psychologist, who, after a number of psychedelic experiences, became a very spiritual being and primarily veered toward the form of Hinduism, I think. But he had a great book that I would recommend to you called Be Here Now, which is an important and profound message. Then we have the verse of the robe, which says, vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, saving all creations. So here we get into what is the purpose of Buddhism. I've talked about it as relief from suffering. And in a sense, you could also flip it around and say to attain liberation. Liberation from suffering, from being trapped into a delusional kind of way of viewing the world as a result of the dualism of our thinking mind. And again, what's the alternative? The alternative is a formless field of benefaction, sunyata, or emptiness, that all things and individuals, people, whatever, are empty of any completely and totally independent existence, which means that there's a basic kind of interconnectedness, and that interconnectedness leads to compassion, which leads to benefaction, which is a desire to help people, saving all creations. So it says, I wear the Tathagata's teaching, and I come back over and over to the Lotus Sutra, and certainly that's the charge to the Bodhisattvas within not only the Lotus Sutra, but many of the Mahayana Sutras. What is the Buddha telling them? Go out and help people, basically. In other words, as you attain deeper insights into prajna, or wisdom, and realize more experientially the interconnectedness that you have with all beings, that you should pass the Dharma along and help people through the benefit that the Dharma can provide by virtue of them being exposed to it. And then we have this section on Shakyamuni describing him as the great physician, turning the Dharma wheel, roll the Dharma wheel. That's what the gods were telling Shakyamuni that they wanted him to do when he was sitting under the Bodhi tree. Go roll the Dharma wheel, which he did. And so healing manifests throughout space and time as he turns the Dharma wheel, teaches the Dharma that this has a healing effect. And of course, one of the cosmic Buddhas is the medicine Buddha, and he's a good one. And there's a sutra about him, and you can learn more about him if you Google it, I'm sure. He releases all sentient beings from their suffering and brings them to great joy. So I'm thinking about, I think the Dalai Lama once talked about that. What's the purpose? He flips the suffering on its head and says, we want to be happy, we want to be joyful, and that's part of what the Dharma can bring us. In sitting zazen, we offer our healing energies to, and here's where you bow your head, and it says, the peace of the world, and to all sick and suffering beings throughout space and time. So it's kind of a prayer, and kind of the implication being that there are healing energies, if you want to believe that, and that we can exude those and extend them in directions that we feel are beneficial to humankind. To the peace of the world, gosh knows we need that, given the kinds of conflicts that exist at the present time, and to all sick and suffering beings throughout space and time. Then you raise your head, and then it says, may the Dharma body maintain strength and health, and the years of life be lengthened for, and then here's silence, where we can, on our own individual basis, think of who we wish to exert these energies, these healing energies toward. Of course, the Dharma body is the Dharmakaya. It says, may the Dharma body maintain strength and health. Well, the Dharma body is beyond all form, beyond all ability to describe in terms of concepts. Honestly, I don't think we really need to worry about the Dharma body, but that's another story. So anyhow, we are wishing that the years of life be lengthened for the people that we have in mind, and also may they be serene throughout all their ills. May penetrating light dispel the darkness of ignorance in those folks. Let all karma be wiped out, and the mind flower bloom in eternal spring. What wonderful imagery. May we ascend to the throne of enlightenment and accomplish the way together. So here again, within Zen, of course, there's one perspective within Zen that would suggest that we already are in possession of the Buddha mind. But more generally, for most people within many forms of Buddhism, the idea is to attain enlightenment, to engage in self-power practices in order to make progress on the path and to attain enlightenment, which again is in contradiction to the basic Shin approach, where we feel like we will attain enlightenment at the time that we die on the basis of the power of Amida's vow. And then all the persons in the meditation session chant the following. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, Mahaprajna Paramita. So here we're invoking that cosmic array of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that I've referenced in other videos that inhabit the universe, and that are available to us to contemplate and reflect upon as they manifest themselves at the Sambhogakaya level of the Trikaya or three-body Buddha doctrine. That's the point where there are 3 bells, which starts a period of meditation, which what we do in the morning is 20 minutes. And I'll tell you, my friends, I'll be going inside my head. I'll go, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. But it doesn't take long before my monkey mind is off, thinking about this, thinking about the other, etc., etc. So any of you who have tried to, quote, meditate and focus on the breath, you know what I'm talking about. Now, again, I'm not a Zen Buddhist. I'm not a practitioner who regularly engages in meditation, my assumption is, on the basis of what teachers teach, is that if you do this regularly and for longer periods of time, you do get to be better at, keeping your focus on a single kind of point, such as the breath going in and out of the nostrils, or the chest going up and down. But there again, even that kind of focus is more oriented, I think, toward the Vipassana rather than the true Zen approach, where, you're just sitting, and whatever comes up, it comes up. But I'll leave it to others who have expertise to describe how to actually meditate within the Zen tradition. So then, interestingly, we have 4 immeasurables, which sounds like the metta kind of loving kindness sutta or approach to verses, which says, "May all beings be free from suffering and the root of suffering. May all beings know happiness and the root of happiness. May all beings live in sympathetic joy, rejoicing in the happiness of others. May all beings live in equanimity, free from passion, aggression, and delusion." So I don't need to dwell on that. It's the basic wish that we have, that all beings be happy. But I do want to comment on the 4 commitments which come next, where it says, "I commit myself to a culture of nonviolence and reverence for life. I commit myself to a culture of solidarity and a just economic order. I commit myself to a culture of inclusiveness and a life based on truthfulness. And I commit myself to a culture of equal rights for all people, regardless of race, gender, ability, and economic status." Well, I was curious about this because, those don't sound like typical Buddhist verses. And so what I did discover, and if you want to look it up, it's entitled Zen and the 4 Commitments. You can find it online. And what I discovered was the history of these 4 commitments, which is from the 1993 World Parliament of Religions that met in Chicago. One of the most important things that came out of it was a document called Toward a Global Ethic. This document was signed by 200 religious leaders representing pretty much all the world's religions, and the content of it was essentially these 4 commitments. The last one was phrased in a little different way, but I found that to be quite interesting, that this was kind of a universal declaration, almost like the Declaration of Human Rights that emerged out of World War II. Because, I'm interested in the notion of interfaith. And I think interfaith is important, that we not maintain ourselves in our little silos and think that we're the only ones that have the truth, which is frankly part of why I gain benefit from participating in Zen exposure, even though, again, I maintain my commitment and my belief system, my worldview, for myself as being associated with Shin Buddhism, where I realize my own limitations relative to the kinds of aspirations that people that are pursuing other forms of Buddhism might take upon themselves as their own level of belief and activity. And then finally, of course, it ends with this Bodhisattvas for All verse, where it says, "Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it." Namo Mita Bodhs. Namo Mita Bodhs. Namo Mita Bodhs.